Hello and happy Friday. The Transport Department is planning to digitalize its license-related services. The measure is set to be rolled out in the middle of this year. Motor vehicle licenses will no longer have expiration dates upon the start of the digitalization scheme, which could expand to include driving licenses as early as the end of the year. Timothy Lee has our top story.
Currently, motor vehicle licenses are required to be renewed annually. In an effort to expand the digitalization of the city's services, the Transport Department will offer new electronic versions of motor vehicle licenses in the middle of this year, which will no longer indicate an expiration date. Motorists who wish to renew their licenses can do so online and will no longer need to submit physical vehicle examination and registration documents. And between the end of this year and early next year, the Transport Department will offer electronic versions of driving licenses.
It is Transport Department's commitments in increasing the use of electronic means to provide greater convenience for users of the Transport Department services. In the past years, actually, with the launching of the smart applications, we have indeed started the process of introducing e-services.
The department also noted the new driving licenses will feature a QR code, which will allow the police to check the legitimacy of the document via mobile devices. Authorities also plan to hold license plate auctions online, which will take place twice a month. Each auction will last for 7 days, and residents are allowed to bid online. Regarding the expansion of this service to customized license plates, the Transport Department said it will need more time to make considerations. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
The Transport Department plans to start trials permitting pedestrians to cross intersections diagonally, which is currently illegal. The first two intersections set to implement the trial are located at Tsim Sha Tsui and Sha Tin. The former lies between Granville Road and Carnarvon Road. The latter is between Sha Kok Street and Yat Tai Street. Authorities noted the habit of crossing diagonally at intersections is widespread and that these two intersections are suitable for testing. As the peak season for winter approaches, a specialist doctor said vaccination is the most effective way to prevent influenza infection. Mimo Singhai reports.
As the temperature fluctuates over the past week, more residents are feeling unwell. A few of my classmates have shown cold symptoms, this girl said. The Center for Health Protection said in a press conference on Thursday the winter influenza may enter its peak period next week. A doctor who specializes in clinical microbiology and infection explained it is important to receive influenza vaccines, especially this year.
I think the most important and most effective way to prevent influenza infection is probably receiving the vaccine, the seasonal influenza vaccines. And because for the past few years we have been using facial surgical masks, so our immune system may have reduced immunity against influenza A.
The CHV also said increasing activity of a new COVID-19 variant, JN.1, has been recorded. What would the symptoms be if a person caught the winter influenza and the new variant simultaneously?
It is very difficult to differentiate them from any other upper respiratory tract virus infection. If one is developing a fever with generalized malaise, with bone pain, muscle pain, and sometimes with runny nose to start off with, or sore throat, these are all pointing towards the upper respiratory tract infection.
Meanwhile, Patrick Ip, an academic in pediatrics and adolescent medicine, said patients can conduct rapid antigen tests if they had a prolonged fever or cough. Moons 9, TVB News.
The Airport Authority today announced the launch of retail bonds worth $5 billion. The bonds will have a tenor of 2.5 years with an interest rate of 4.25%. Interest payments will be generated once every 3 months. Bonds will be sold at increments of $10,000. The subscription period for eligible individuals who hold a Hong Kong identity card is between January 17th and 25th. The bond will be issued on February 5th. Trading on the Hong Kong stock market starts on the 6th. Research by an MPF consultant company found the average return for the Mandatory Provident Fund of 2023 was over $8,171 after the deduction of various management fees. The research found the average return last year was 3.5%. The U.S. stock market saw the strongest performance with a return of around 29%, while the Hong Kong and mainland markets recorded losses. The company suggests high-risk investors to allocate some assets to U.S. and European equity funds. Overseas, at least 94 people are confirmed dead from the serious earthquake that hit Japan this week. Hundreds are still missing. More than 80 have been rescued. Workers freed an old woman from a two-story building in a race against time. The slow, delicate removal of the quake victim happened in Wajima, Ishikawa Prefecture on Thursday. The resident was in her 80s and became trapped after the earthquake on New Year's Day and had been lying in the rubble for 3 days. She was conscious when a sniffer dog found her. Men rushed to the collapsed building to rescue the elderly woman, knowing the critical 72-hour mark to find survivors was nearing. They crawled on their hands and knees to pull her from the debris. The woman, covered by a blanket, was passed through a damaged window on stretcher by around a dozen workers. North Korea fired more than 200 artillery rounds today near a disputed maritime border with South Korea. The exchange led residents of two remote South Korean islands on the western maritime frontier to evacuate to bomb shelters. Seoul's forces then fired live rounds towards the disputed Northern Limit Line border. The firing by North Korea caused no civilian or military damage. South Korea's Defense Minister Shin Won-sik called the North's move an act of provocation that escalates tension and threatens peace on the Korean peninsula. The waters near the disputed NLL have been the site of several deadly clashes between North and South Korea. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said Beijing hopes all relevant parties will keep calm and exercise restraint and refrain from actions that aggravate tensions. Welcome back. As its attacks on Gaza continued, Israel has announced a more targeted approach in hunting down Hamas fighters and their leaders, as well as its plans for Gaza after the war ends. This as U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has embarked on a visit to the Middle East for a week of diplomacy. Daniel Rao reports.
In a document named Vision for Phase 3, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant outlined a new stage of Israel's war in Gaza, a more targeted approach in the north and further pursuit of Hamas leaders in the south, while Israel seeks to free remaining hostages held by Hamas. Gallant said operations in the north would include raids and demolishing tunnels with air and ground strikes. In the south, where most of Gaza's 2.3 million population now live in tents, he said the focus would be on wiping out Hamas leaders and rescuing the Israeli hostages remaining. Gallant's statement underlined that the war would go on until Hamas's military and government capabilities are eliminated. After the war, the statement said Israel will keep security control, taking military action in Gaza when necessary to ensure there are no threats and maintaining inspections of all goods entering the territory. Gallant said there would be no Israeli civilians in Gaza, ruling out calls by some in Israel's far right for a return of Jewish settlers to the territory. Israel withdrew its troops and settlers from Gaza in 2005 after a 38-year presence. Palestinian entities such as local civil servants or communal leaders would run the territory, with Israel providing information to guide civilian operations. A multinational task force led by the US would be in charge of rebuilding. Gallant's statement comes as Israeli shelling of Gaza on Thursday killed more than 20 Palestinians. Separately, 5 Palestinians were killed in an Israeli airstrike on a car in al-Nusrat refugee camp. Israel's war against Hamas is nearing the 3-month mark amid international concern that the conflict is spreading beyond Gaza. Aiming to help prevent the conflict from expanding, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has embarked on a visit to the Middle East for a week of diplomacy. Blinken will visit Jordan, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Israel, the West Bank, Egypt, as well as Turkey and Greece.
He will focus on, as he has consistently since October 7th, preventing the conflict from expanding. He will discuss specific steps parties can take, including how they can use their influence with others in the region to avoid escalation. It is in no one's interest, not Israel's, not the region's, not the world's, for this conflict to spread beyond Gaza.
Daniel, TV News.
At least 4 people were killed after 2 trains collided on Indonesia's main island of Java today, causing carriages to buckle and overturn. The accident happened about 500 meters from a train station in West Java province. The express train was said to be carrying 287 passengers and was traveling from Surabaya, the capital of East Java province. It slammed into a commuter train with 191 passengers at about 6:30 a.m. A West Java police spokesperson said at least 4 train crew members were killed, including the driver and his assistant on the commuter train, as well as a steward and a security guard on the express train. Several parts of Europe are battling extreme cold or heavy flooding. Sweden is shivering at around -40. Flooding is causing problems in France, Germany, and the UK. David Garrett with more.
Sweden looks like a beautiful winter wonderland, although it's not quite so wonderful when at 10:51 in the morning the temperature is -35 degrees Celsius. Scandinavia is no stranger to low temperatures, but with the merciless mercury falling to -41 in some areas this week, it is as cold as Sweden has been since records began. In the country's Arctic north, power has been lost to thousands of homes, forcing locals to burn wood for warmth. Further south, no one was going anywhere fast on the E22 motorway. Drivers were snowed in and stranded. They had to sleep in cars. There has been widespread travel disruption. In Norway, schools are closed. Finland is expecting even colder weather over the weekend, with an unusually low -20 expected in Helsinki. Heavy-duty winter coats were out in force on the streets of Moscow. Some of the most built-up areas of the Russian capital are snow-covered, with temperatures below -30. It is one of the coldest winters in a generation, with the Moskva River frozen solid. In St. Petersburg, it was -25, although this man was not afraid to break the ice and take a dip.
Отлично, отлично.
Meanwhile, cities are partially submerged in northern France. Drones show statues, houses and factories surrounded by water. Authorities are struggling to cope with the latest deluge from Atlantic storms. 10,000 homes were evacuated. Special pumps have been brought in from the Czech Republic to reduce water levels. Chancellor Olaf Scholz praised emergency workers and promised state assistance for those affected in northern and eastern Germany. The River Helm has burst its banks in some areas. Dikes have been breached, forcing residents to deploy hundreds of sandbags, but there still is widespread devastation. Scholz urged the country to stick together. Elsewhere, Storm Henk has caused chaos in the United Kingdom. 1,000 houses have been inundated with water amid heavy wind and rain. Nottinghamshire in the Midlands is under a major warning, with the level of the River Trent rising fast. Trains have been cancelled, roads blocked, businesses shuttered. Built-up areas have not been spared. People had to be rescued from Hackney in inner city London, where a canal overflowed. David Garrett, TVB News.
Farm Fest that sells local agricultural and fishery products began in Mongkok today. Some green, yellow, and red cherry tomatoes, a round-looking eggplant, and massive fish. All these products and more are available during the 3-day event at Fa Hoi Park. There are about 400 stalls at the carnival. A fish stall owner said most customers are willing to spend money because of the special products on offer. Large crowds flocked to the offices of Hong Kong Post as they issued special commemorative stamps to celebrate the Year of the Dragon. Many people were seen queuing for the dragon stamp throughout the morning at the Central Post Office. Some residents prepared envelopes waiting for post office staff to give them the limited collectible. The Year of the Dragon set contains 4 stamps, which costs between $2 and $6. These stamps are the first to have their designs made using laser technology. Stamps commemorating the Year of the Dragon are also issued on the mainland. Local residents said Chinese people have traditionally called themselves descendants of the dragon. That's the news. Thanks for watching. Have a good weekend.